legendary investor Michael Burry just predicted another huge crash. Michael Burry, ever since 2008, where he foresaw the last housing collapse, has made a multitude of contrarian predictions about markets that have all slowly turned into reality. In early 2021, Burry stood against the bullish sentiment at the time and predicted that we would see massive inflation prints for years to come and warned investors of the coming stock market crash, but no one listened to him. He then went on to warn against a huge cryptocurrency bull run that was taking place, warning investors that the problem with what was going on was the leverage in markets and warning that the mother of all crashes was coming. Fast forward to today, to everyone's surprise, all of his predictions came true, with the stock market getting battered throughout 2022 due to high inflation and cryptocurrency down 70% plus across the board, with huge players in the market being wiped out by excessive leverage, just as Burry warned. Now, in a cryptic warning to investors, Burry has tweeted, "You have no idea how short I am." A clear message to investors, this crash is far from over. And he's not alone in his viewpoint. Famed investors and tech billionaires such as Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Jeff Bezos, Jamie Dimon, Chamath Palihapitiya, and Jeremy Grantham all agree there is much more pain to come for markets. In this video, we will go over exactly what Burry is predicting will happen, as well as the viewpoints from other investors as why they think 2023 is going to be an extremely bad year for markets. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video, where we will cover why Burry believes we are not even close to the bottom of markets and how he is personally positioning his portfolio to survive the upcoming crash. Also, only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you enjoy finance content, consider subscribing or liking the video. It's free and you can always change your mind. Now, according to Michael Burry, there are three main factors that will cause a collapse worse than the financial crisis of 2008. And based off these three factors, Michael Burry has gone and sold out of almost all of his stocks. First factor that Burry is extremely concerned about is regarding sticky inflation. In a recent tweet, he writes, "Inflation appears in spikes. When the spike is resolving, it won't be because of Biden or Powell. It will be because that is the essence, the nature of inflation. It resolves, fools people, and then comes back. When it comes back, neither the President of the United States nor the Federal Reserve will take credit." Now, what Burry is referring to is a situation we have seen play out twice before, once in the 1940s and then again in the 1970s. A first initial inflation spike is then followed by a second, larger inflation spike, which can be clearly seen. This is because the economy usually collapses after the first spike due to the raising of interest rates and intervention of the Federal Reserve. Thus, a second spike of inflation occurs, even more severe and terrifying than the first wave. Now, this isn't a view that only Burry holds, with the sharpest minds of Wall Street and greatest investors of this generation also agreeing we are about to see a second, more severe wave of inflation which will crush the economy. Just this week, tech billionaire and investor Chamath Palihapitiya had this to say about a second wave of inflation, with words that spookily echo exactly what Burry is predicting to happen.
Here's this really interesting setup. We have a bunch of very positive news that I think we all have to process. First positive news was that inflation ticked down. Now, here's what I'll tell you. There's a caveat here. I talked to a bunch of pretty smart sharps on Wall Street. And, two things. Number one is they all gave credit to David Sachs, and they said Sachs was totally right. Double dip recession is coming. But then they said, tell Sachs that we think that these are the sharps. We think that there's a double hump in inflation coming, which means it's coming down to come back up. And there's a bunch of reporting vagaries that may cause that. So keep that in the back of your mind. But positive news, number one, is inflation ticking down. Number two, Jason, we talked about this. A federal judge basically stayed Biden's attempt at giving student loan relief. Now, that would have been a $500 billion transfer payment from the government into the hands of individuals. It is deflationary to not give that money to people. It's effectively taking stimulus away from folks. Number three, it looks like we're headed towards a split government, which means that we are not probably going to see any more stimulus over the next 2 years. Number four, Ukraine wins in Curzon. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Number five, the United States announced yesterday through the Wall Street Journal that they had essentially said no to Ukraine's request for advanced drones. And they said to Ukraine, essentially, you need to go and negotiate an end game here. And number 6, China has started to relax its COVID policies and Xi is pivoting to economy first. I think if you take them together, what it says is that, wow, there's the potential for a lot of great positive developments over the next 6 or 9 months. And I don't think that was adequately priced in the market. But here's the problem, and this is why we've been rallying. The problem is that most of this rallying has been because of a bunch of short covering by folks who were pretty pessimistic and negative after the last few inflation prints. So this is not really net new buying that we saw over the last couple of days. So you take it all together, I'm like, it's still going to probably trend up a little bit. But then again, we talked about this, Jason, when the VIX gets into the low 20s or the high teens, that's probably the short-term top, and then it turns around, and unfortunately, we're near the low 20s, high teens. So that's kind of my thought on things right now.
So that is the first factor that has Burry extremely concerned about markets, a second wave of inflation. However, the second factor is perhaps an even more serious issue. The White House recently redefined what a recession is in July of 2022. One of the main points of this act was that despite being in a technical recession, which is defined as 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, the unemployment rate was at 3%, which is at an all-time low. In 2020, the unemployment rate was 15%, therefore 3% is extremely bullish for the economy. The basic premise is that because unemployment is so low, workers are not being laid off and the economy is strong. However, this presumption is dangerously wrong. The unemployment rate is actually a very poor indicator of the true health of the economy, as it is a lagging indicator of a recession. Hence, if the unemployment rate is at an all-time low at the moment, it will increase in the near future as the economy collapses. This is unfolding before our very eyes as we are seeing layoffs all across the board, with even historic layoffs coming from all the big tech giants. Google, Apple, Amazon, Twitter, and Meta are all laying off huge amounts of tech workers for the first time in their history. Burry commented on this in a recent tweet. The white-collar employment bubble is bursting right before our eyes, and the longer it takes the redundancy to disappear, the more permanent the decline in employment will be. Working from home will in time be seen as a culprit. The approaching sky-high unemployment rates are going to affect the entire economy in the near future. However, there is a third and final factor Burry believes is the most terrifying issue facing markets at the moment, and that is margin. Margin, for those not well versed with the concept, is essentially when investors take out loans or borrow money in order to buy investments, potentially increasing their returns when asset prices go upwards. However, where margin gets to be so pernicious is in a down cycle as asset prices continue to fall. The reason for this is as prices plummet, investors get margin called and brokers are forced to sell off their positions. This can trigger a cascading effect in which other investors' margin calls get hit, forcing them to sell, which triggers another margin call, and so on it goes. Margin works great in a bull market, however in a bear market it is extremely destructive and can wreak havoc on markets. The scariest part of all this is at the moment we're on the verge of the largest bubble of margin in history. This is a situation that is best outlined by chief investment strategist Jeremy Grantham, who not only foresaw the 2008 housing bubble, just like Burry, but also the dot-com bubble of 2000. In a recent interview, he echoes the words of Burry on how this is going to be the largest unwinding of any bubble he has ever seen before.
I only specialize in what I call the really great bubbles. If you go back to 1929 to 2000, to Japan, and the housing part of the housing bubble. And you ask, how did conditions look? Profit margins looked great. The forecast was great. There was no chance of a recession. A few months ago, smart people were saying there was a 20% chance of a recession in 3 years. I mean, it is quite amazing. And what happens after the bubbles break is there's always a recession pretty quickly. And people never get it. People never forecast it. And along with the recession comes a drop in profit margins. Going into the bubbles breaking, profit margins are always at a peak. Bubbles don't peak for no reason. They peak because economic conditions are nearly perfect. And that includes low inflation and high profit margins. And the first thing to go in a recession, of course, is the profit margin. And that is very likely to happen this time. We should be in a recession, mild or severe is the question, but we should be in some sort of recession fairly quickly, and profit margins from a real peak have a long way that they can decline. And if you want to get into the longer term, I think this kind of 2000 bubble that we have is dangerously likely to morph into the 1970s, where inflation is always a part of the background discussion and where growth rate starts to dwindle away. So you have shades of stagflation as we had in the 70s, where commodities are intermittently scarce, price jags here and there, as we have seen recently, where the whole system is so strung out and so borrowed that it's lost its resilience. All you have to do is cough in COVID or a war in the Ukraine, and you see the problems ricocheting around the system that was not designed to absorb any kind of punch. Last minute inventory delivery, no reserves, putting all of your business with one country far away, no flexibility, no resilience. And now we begin to pay the price.
So there you have it, the 3 factors why Burry believes we are due for another huge crash in markets and why you wouldn't believe how short he is. Investors often complain that Burry never gives enough warning to allow them to exit their positions in markets before huge collapses. However, Burry also addressed this in a recent tweet. People say I didn't warn last time. I did, but no one listened. So I warn this time, and still no one listens, but I will have proof I warned. So do you think investors will listen to Michael Burry this time around? Let me know in the comments. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed today's video and that provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next video, and as always, all the best.